In this lesson, we'll begin adding some dimensions, text, and even a few parking spaces in our neighbor's lot. All right, so let's start with the parking spaces here. Definitely want this to be, people who are reading this plan know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to keep it pretty simple with our parking here. Make a couple of assumptions here. I'm going to assume that my parking spot's going to be about 16 inches, or 16 feet long, sorry. And I'm assuming that it's 8 feet wide. We'll do the same thing here, 16 feet. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new layer for parking. Now the principle behind this is definitely include parking on your site plan. It's really simple in this project, but it's going to be important for you to do in all your projects. Parking is very important, whether it's commercial, residential, whatever type of project you're working on. So this one I'm going to say parking. And for this one, we'll keep it our regular line color here. And we'll definitely keep it at continuous. And I'm going to make that my current layer. But I want to adjust the weight. So we'll go, we'll say it goes up to maybe a 0.004. So I'll green check mark that, make that my current layer. We'll select the ones we drew, and we'll add those to that layer. So we'll say parking. Perfect. So now we can add a couple of spots here. I'm just going to move this one up just a little bit. So move over and up. And I'm just going to simply copy and paste for the rest of the spots here. So basically how this reads is, again, it's a historic neighborhood here. That's the scenario. But we've got a couple of houses in here, and we also have an apartment or some special type of building on this side. So now I can select the parking spot we just drew. I'm going to copy that and paste it and get as many in here as I can. So it looks like we'll probably be able to get 6 people to park in here. And I'm going to mirror this across, shoot across this way. I'm going to do it from this midpoint. And we'll hit no to keep the other ones, and perfect, we got parking. So now it's starting to make a little more sense. So I'm going to check, see how this line weight worked out that I selected. So I'm going to go to a preview real quick. So you can tell I like to definitely check and see how I'm going along the way. Nice. Those are our parking spots. Definitely no question about it. So I'm going to escape and get out of this. And now we can start adding some dimension and text. So let's start with some dimensions. So first thing I want to do is I want to set my dim style. So it's really easy to read at any scale looking at this. So I'm going to go dim style, basically typing in D-I-M-S-T-Y-L-E and hitting enter. And now what I want to do is I want to modify my settings. I want to stay in this standard setting. So I'm going to go to modify. And there's 2 things I'm interested in. My symbols and arrows. And I want to adjust my arrow size. So I want that to be big enough that we can see, because we're going to be doing quite a few dimensions. So we need to be able to see exactly from what point to what point for our arrow. So I'm going to assume that needs to be 4 inches. And the second thing we need to change is our text. So I'm going to change my text height. We'll change that to, we'll say 8 inches. I'm going to say OK here, close here, and now we can start laying out our dimensions. So I'm going to go to dimension. So the first thing I want to add for my dimension is going to be my property line dimension. We simply go from space to space here. And this should be our 56-foot dimension. And it looks like it's reading in decimals, so I'm going to go back to dim style one more time. And I want this to read in my architectural style. We could keep it in dimensions and inches, but I'm going to go with my architectural style. So we'll modify. And I'm going to go with primary units. We'll go with architectural. I like what I see. Okay. And now we'll do the dimensions again. So we'll say from this point to this point should be 56 feet. And that reads nicely, and I can see exactly what's going on. So that's awesome. So we're also going to have a dimension for our driveway. So we definitely want to call that out. So we can go with maybe a dimension for this driveway, as well as for that entire opening, entire drive width. I want to have a dimension for my sidewalks. Definitely want to include that. Very important. We want to show our existing dimensions, and we also want to show that we're not going to make any additional changes to those. So we're going to do the same thing for our median here. then I'm going to call out a dimension for my curb, and I'm going to try to do that kind of off here a little bit. So we'll say from there to there. Very important stuff. So got to let them know exactly what's going on with our site. So we're going to want to know our front yard setback as well as the back. So we'll do the same thing here as well. So we'll go, say, from the face of this to our property line. And again, I'm going to be supporting some of this with text. So we'll have our dimension. We'll also have some text right next to it. So we have our porch. I want to see what my back side or my back offset is. We'll repeat my linear here as well. And we'll shoot that up to the property line. That property line goes a little bit beyond the fence. So we have all this in place here. So we'll go ahead and get the width of this as well. We'll find a good place to snap at here. And let's see. From that location, do a dimension over to this side. So now we know how big that lot is, but now we want to know the length of our lot. So I'm going to do that dimension. So we'll go repeat linear, and I'm going to come to here, all the way down to this area. And that should be 140. And just off just a tad, probably just accidentally took a measurement from one of our hatch patterns here. But I definitely want to get it right, so we're going to do it right. So we'll go to dimension. And want to go from this point all the way up to this point. So that should read 140, hopefully, and not some crazy number. And it's still reading a crazy number. So let's take the dimension from somewhere else. We'll do it from maybe the middle here. From midpoint to midpoint. There we go. Perfect. Should say 140 now. And it does. All right, so we have some important dimensions here. Let's get a couple more in. I want to show the distance from this building to that, to our site, as well as these guys. So we'll get those last two in. So we'll say from this building to our property line is that dimension. I'm going to do the same thing for this building. I want to know how far away things are from our site. So I'm going to go this building here. This is actually their driveway. So we'll go repeat linear, do the dimension here. I'm going to go from the inside. And there we go. So these are pretty much, most of the dimensions were, oh, center line. One more dimension. So we'll go repeat linear. And I want to know the center line of the street. One from the curb face. But also, I want to know the distance of that from a face on our building here. So I'm going to go off of our house. And we'll say the center line is that distance. So I'll actually bring that to about right there. And I can actually scoot this dimension over. So we've got plenty of dimensions, and I'm sure it really depends on your project, the scope of your project, what you're trying to do, and the requirements for submitting these kind of things to be reviewed. But we have most of our dimensions in place. So now it's time to support some of these graphics and measurements with some text. And in the next lesson, we'll start adding text to finish out our site plan.